Hey guys, welcome back to Community Starcraft 2. I'm your host, Magnet, and today we're talking about defending Zerg's cheese. And what I mean by that is Zergs that just be super aggressive in the early game and try to kill you with something cheap before you've really gotten into the strategy that you want to do. So basically, as you can see in the white text, it just says scout, react, and win. That's the whole idea behind this, is that if you know what's going on, you should know the reactions and you should be able to win from that point. So that's what we will, or at least should be able to see in most of these games. So knowledge is power, sirs, and the very few ladies that watch these videos. So we'll jump into the game here and get started. We're going to be watching Jockji against LZ. And this is a weird variation of cheese because this is such a big map. You wouldn't normally expect it here. So Jockji is going to basically be opening like you normally would on a huge map like this, or I guess you could open like this on pretty much any map. So Jockji is just going to open up with a barracks and a gas right afterward for a Reaper. And the Reaper is quintessential to scouting in the early game, just because it gets so much information as far as what's going on. If you scout something silly like this, then you should know exactly what to do against it, and that's kind of going to be what this video teaches you. So he's going to scout with his SCV. He's just going to try and figure out where the opponent is. He's going to scout over here. The Reaper is rallied to the left, so he's going to scout here. But eventually he will scout the right location. And looking back in the Zerg space, you can see Zergling speed already on the way. Any gas mining before any hatchery being taken is a big red flag. And that means that you need to really be defensive and try to figure out what the Zerg is doing and figure out ways to beat that. So he's eventually going to scout this, but it's going to be a little while. Still, Jockji's going to start a command center like he normally would. And as we can see, the play here is a baneling nest from LZ before hatchery. So this basically means that he needs to win with this baneling attack or else it's over. And all Jockji needs to do is defend against this, and of course he needs that knowledge. So right now he's sending his SCV in. There's a lot of Zerglings out on the way, but as soon as he sees maybe a baneling nest, then he's going to be in great shape. So the SCV is going to walk in here. If he gets far enough in here to see this, then he's going to know exactly what's going on. There's no reason to make a baneling nest until basically your lair is already either building or it's much later in the game and they're on at least 2 bases. So SCV coming in here, the SCV doesn't see it, so you might be like, oh no, Jockji doesn't know. But that's why you make the Reaper. The Reaper can figure out what's happening well in advance. So on the other side, there should also be something else coming up to help you get into the next stage of the game, which if you've watched professional TvZ recently, you know that it always follows up with Hellions in some form or another. But Jockji is waiting to start making those Hellions and making the factory until he can figure out what's going on. The fact that there were already Zerglings and a Queen out here in the main to push this away is kind of a red flag, so Jockji is being a little bit careful, and he's going to start Marines first. So this Reaper's going to come in here, and he's going to try and figure out what's happening. So he's just going to walk right back there. There's nothing the Queen can do to stop this, so the Reaper finds out it's a baneling nest, and he sees it now, so he needs to know what to do. Unfortunately for him, he's already started a second command center, so that can be kind of hairy, but you can still hold attacks like this, even if you've planned in going into a longer game already. The play here is that this is 1 base baneling, and Jockji's going to figure out that it's 1 base here in just a second, or maybe he can already figure that considering the baneling nest is so early. So he knows that LZ has to win with this attack, or he's dead. So the play here is you need to just thicken this wall as much as possible. If you can make the banelings get wasted on depots, and still the Zerglings can't break in after the banelings are dead, then you just have a bunch of stuff behind your wall and a bunch of stuff in bunkers and stuff that are killing Zerglings, and the Zerglings can't do anything about it. So that's exactly what we're going to see here from Jockji. So the banelings are morphing. Jockji's just adding layer upon layer to his wall. Notice the extra depots. You can use another barracks or maybe an engineering bay or something to start taking up some damage. So he's making this so that even if the banelings break through the first layer, which are these 2 depots, and the barracks won't die for a long time, it has way too much health, then he's still going to have a tight wall against these Zerglings, and if the Zerglings are ever walled against any sort of damage, they're never going to do anything. So that's the whole idea here. Jockji continue to make Marines, and he knows that there might be a slight hole here because he can't fully block this off, otherwise he'll block his Marines from coming out. So he's just setting an SCV on hold position right now, but the fact that this is basically a double layered wall against a baneling boss is going to mean that he's going to need a ton of banelings just to break through it, and even still it's probably not going to be enough. I should also mention that the bigger the buildings you have on this wall, the better. So if there's like a barracks and an engineering bay rather than depots, that's going to be a lot more solid against Zerglings as well. And the final factor is being willing to pull SCVs to repair against this. So the banelings come up here, and LZ realizes that this is a huge wall, and there's no way I'm going to be able to crash through this and win, especially if I only have like 5 or 6 Zerglings following up. The Marines are just going to kill that so easily. Then what's the point? So LZ knows that Jakji has figured this out. He knows that he needs more stuff before he can go. And Jakji, if you're still, you need to continue to respect this. So he says, alright, factory's coming up now. I'm just going to continue to hold out for this. I'm going to continue to produce Marines. I can lower this depot and re-raise it later on if I need to get my Marines out of there. So he does have also SCVs in position to repair. You can't just get lazy about this and just be like, I've held it, it doesn't matter. You need to continue to take this seriously while also continuing to progress. So he's going to continue to progress into Hellions, so that eventually, if LZ didn't do anything more and there was only a handful of Banelings and Zerglings down here, he could kind of control his Hellions, pick off some stuff, kind of lure them back to the wall and whatnot. But still, he's taking this very seriously. So factory coming down with a tank right now, or rather with a tech lab right now. It will be for a tank if it ever gets that far. So Banelings start to come up here right now. Marines are going to tank a little bit of the damage as they just popped out. It's kind of unfortunate for them, but you're going to see that the depot wall being broken down, the first layer being broken down, is fine as long as you can continue to defend against that. And Jakji actually canceled his command center earlier. He's starting his third command center now, knowing that he has enough tools to hold this off. I should also mention that the reason that he's going for this factory with the tech lab is because if you can put a tank out, that'll defend against any sort of follow-up cheeses like roaches and stuff. So that was the idea here, but we're going to see this basically fail. It breaks through the bunker on the one side, so you can see if they get enough Banelings, that's why you need to continue to still take this seriously. If he breaks through it on one side, he still has a big problem on his hands that he has to deal with, but I'm going to slow this down. Now, all of a sudden, you need to try and use your SCVs to tank, and the Marines should be targeting Banelings the best they can. If you can just get it down to only Zerglings, you can use your SCVs and Marines to push those away while taking minimal losses. It's okay to lose a few SCVs here, as long as you were producing them while this was still going on, because back at home, let's take a look at LZ's worker count. He's only on 14. There's no way they're going to be able to afford this kind of aggression and still be on a high number of workers. So you need to understand that even fighting with SCVs is worth it as long as you just hold. And of course, if you have 2 or maybe 3 command centers coming up, then mules can keep you in the game for a long time. So just continue to fight against this. There's still one bunker active. He's using his SCVs to fight. There's going to be more Marines on the way. The tank is being started, so he's fine for the time being. This can still be a little bit irritating, but you can still pull extra units, maybe pull your Marines out of the bunker to deal with that. And the other thing that I was really meaning to mention for quite a while is that even if your wall might get broken, you need to be ready to rebuild it right away. So bring your SCVs forward, rebuild it with depots and stuff. The strongest buildings that build the fastest are engineering bays. They have quite a bit of health and they build really fast. So if you need an emergency wall to be placed, I would actually make an engineering bay. And it also takes up more space and has more hit points. So there's a lot of reasons why you would re-wall with an engineering bay. But getting this re-walled prevents you from dying to any follow-ups. Because you can see LZ is just rallying Zerglings across the map for quite a while. So re-wall. Barracks is eventually going to go down, and at least if it's not repaired in time, and you can see its health is just barely on the edge and it finally dies. But even still, a lot of Zerglings have died in the meantime. Zerglings are dying over here, and if you can get re-walled, which he just starts the barracks again right away, then all of a sudden, what really options does LZ have? This is down to a point where LZ, yeah, he's even up the worker count, but guess what? He's still on one hatchery. His Reaper knows this, and all LZ is going to be needing to do is win with Baneling attacks still. It's not like he can just stop and go back and make a hatchery, because you're on 3 command centers. You're going to be way ahead. So more Banelings coming up here. He should be double walling this once again just for the extra safety, but he does have a tank out now, and if his tank can splash on top of those Banelings, then it's game over. So we're going to watch this continue to progress up here. So coming up here, the tank is getting shots, and you want to manually control this tank. You can actually see that Jakji has it selected with that little red dotted line around it. He's trying to target his tank so it hits the middle of these Banelings as best as possible. And if you can kill the Banelings, then all of a sudden the Zerglings are going up against a wall, and if you repair it, there's no way he's getting through, and he's dead. So bam, the tank just wastes all the Banelings. There's only one Baneling left, maybe one more. The tank can kill it though, or the Marines in the bunker. And LZ at this point is just like, uh-oh, I'm dead. So yeah, so that's an idea of how to hold Baneling cheeses. That's one of the many variants that you might see. And a lot of times those baneling cheeses can be on 1 or 2 bases, but either way you need to find a way to build a wall and repair the wall and re-wall and use the various different tools to try and defend against that. So this time we're going to be watching MMA against Starbuck. Starbuck plays pretty weird from what I've seen so far, so it should be kind of an inkling that MMA can see something like this coming. This isn't going to be a super cheesy 1-base play though. This is going to be a 2-base, which is still possible if they just take the hatchery to try and lure the Terran into a false sense of security. But once again, this is why you need to have scouting tools out on the map to figure this kind of stuff out. So MMA is opening Reaper just like Jockji did in the last game. The Reaper is going to get you a lot of scouting information, and if you keep it alive, a lot of repeated scouting information. So you can see why the Reaper openers are so strong in this matchup. It's not to kill a whole bunch, it's just to know what's going on. So Reaper's coming in here being irritating. You don't want to lose that, and MMA lost it, so that's unfortunate. He has to produce a second Reaper, which he may have already been doing anyway, but still, you don't want to lose that if you can help it. So MMA is doing the normal transition, command center on the way, factory on the way. He knows there's a second hatchery taken, so I'm pretty sure he's seen that. No, he hasn't yet, but I mean, he can figure as much. There's not too much going on here in the main. One other good way to know if you don't have the full story is just to check how much gas they've mined. You can click on the geyser and see if it's at like, he's only mined 160 that we can see right now. It starts with 2,500. And you can see if drones are continuing to mine in there to let you know if he's wanting to be still aggressive. There's not much reason for a Zerg to continue to mine gas once they have Zergling speed on the way. They'll usually stop for a little while and do other things, but that's always a good indicator they might be cheesing you if you can see that continue to go. So MMA getting a third command center even. He's going to place it on his wall. And you might be like, what? Why would you ever put this on your wall? Because it's so vulnerable to a lot of different attacks. This is another thing that can be really annoying, is that if your Reaper is out on the map, and if you, especially if you lost one, then you're going to have to bring your Reapers home back to defend against stuff like this. This can be really irritating, but this isn't the focus of this. So the whole point I was getting to is that command center on the wall seems kind of silly, but if you're defending against an all-in and you need to wall anyway, it's one of the strongest buildings because you can not only, it has a ton of hit points, you can repair it, you can also lift it off if it starts to get too hurt and not actually lose the building. So there's a lot of different flexibility here, and you can see he's starting his wall with the command center, and MMA needs to know what's going on here, so he should send his Reapers back out in just a moment to see what's happening. And what's actually happening is there's a lot of roaches on the way, and this is a 2-base, really low econ roach. This is 30 drones. This is not nearly enough drones to saturate 2 bases, so he's just going to produce roaches out here and try to kill them with roaches and maybe follow up with something like Zerglings or Banelings. So we will see what the follow-up here is in just a second. MMA starting a Marauder, which is really strong against Roach plays, and now he'll know for sure that it's Roach, and it's Roach that's heading across the map because his stuff is starting to get attacked by it. So at this point he needs to think, alright, what kills Roaches? What can I do against this? And what I would do is once this pair of Hellions and this Marauder finishes, I would actually swap this factory and this barracks onto separate add-ons and get a tank out as soon as possible, because a tank is your absolute end game as far as holding these cheeses. If you can get even one tank out and keep it alive for as long as possible and maybe position it up here so it can hit all this area down here but it can't be counterattacked by roaches and stuff without any vision, especially if you place it further back, the roaches will be out of range anyway, then you're going to get a lot done with that. So we're going to see what MMA is able to do. He starts a second Marauder. That's not the worst place I've ever seen, and he starts up mines as well, so that's another option. The Marauders are good against roaches, and the mines can kill a lot if they're sloppy with their engagement. The secondary thing is he's also starting a lot of bunkers. Don't be afraid to drop too many. Even like 3 or 4 is not a bad idea. And some solidarity on this wall is also a good idea. So maybe some extra depots, etc., just in case these first depots get broken. You don't want to have to deal with Zerglings spilling into your base. So you need to be preparing for all of these kind of things. And there's obviously some flexibility here, but ultimately the best play would be a tank. But I think he's opting for the mines because they produce faster, and he's opting for the Marauders because he can fill up his bunkers with those. A lot of different things, but we should really harken back to the fact that he knows that this is going on because he's scouted. And he was active on the map, and he can see this coming. So the follow-up is going to be Banelings. So a lot of times what they're going to do with this is they're not going to attack too hard with Roach. They're going to try to break down the wall with Banelings first, maybe kill some stuff with Banelings, and then go. But the Roaches are still going to attack a little bit. This isn't the end of the world. Don't get too panicked. Just wait. If the supply depot dies, I mean, it's a supply depot. It's not the end of the world. He's planting his mines here so that he can cut off any sort of entry points. There's another mine planted here. He should continue to make mines, but I think at this point he's just saying that he has enough. He realizes that the follow-up is probably going to be banelings, and as long as he kills the roaches and the zerglings that spill in afterwards, he'll be fine. So he's producing more hellions and another marauder, but this would already be over if he had a tank. That's just one thing I can't stress enough. Another thing is that he's preparing just in case he has to evacuate this. He's putting up a bunker here, and he can always raise these depots and put some units back here just in case that happens. So this is another example of extra layering. So you can put extra layers on your wall, of course, but you need to also have a contingency just in case this gets broken because you weren't prepared. Start an extra bunker up here so you can fill it up with your reapers and marauders and whatnot. Maybe you can put your mine here, maybe another mine here or something, and hold off from him walking up the ramp. It sucks to be broken that hard, but it's at least a plan to where you still have an avenue to come back from, assuming you can control your way out of it. So watch this develop here. The baneling nest is almost done, so he's going to start morphing banelings. MMA lost the depot, but he's continuing to re-wall, so zerglings can't just walk in. And Starbuck being wise here, he doesn't know exactly what's going on behind this wall, so he's just waiting for a little while. He's not being too aggressive with these roaches. Now the command center is starting to tank. The banelings are on the way, and notice he's ready to repair with his SCVs. If this is enough banelings to break this bunker, then all of a sudden these banelings were a total waste, but in this case it is enough. And this is the part where stuff's starting to spill in. I need to be willing to lose SCVs to hold this off. So he's going to hide behind his SCVs. He has some few hellions, some marauders, and he's going to be willing to lose these, and he needs to try and push this away as soon as possible so he can re-wall, like we were talking about in the last game. He's going to pull his SCVs forward. The hellions are killing a lot of zerglings. The marauders should be targeted on the roaches, and you can manually do that if you have the APM. He is losing a lot of SCVs here, but the fact that he had the third command center means that he can repopulate really fast. So this is basically held. He did a good enough job. It wasn't fantastic, but he did good enough to put himself in this position. Now you still have to worry about extra follow-ups, and you know the composition right now is roach baneling. So if you have the answers to that, which marauder are good against both of those, they're going to be good against the roaches, and it takes a lot of banelings to kill a marauder. That's fine. MMA's worker count is only down by 2, so overall he's actually in a really good position. He's on 3 command centers versus the 2 bases of Zerg, and this is why the extra command center on the wall was good, because it allowed a lot of extra tanking potential, and he can always lift it off in case it starts to get too hurt. So if you're in this position, you should realize, well, I held your attack. At this point, either you're going to continue to attack me, to which I can just walk home with this if I need to, or you're going to try to expand and play a normal game, so I should try to get in your face if you're trying to do that. And we can see from the production tab that the drones are on the way. So Starbuck's getting a little bit desperate and trying to recreate his drone count and get into a longer game here. MMA needs to realize this and get up in his face. So that's exactly what he's doing. Worst case scenario, he has to walk these back home, but otherwise he's fine. And this is basically kind of turned into a little more of a normal game. You still do need to be aware that if they were aggressive once, they may be aggressive again, so you need to protect against that as well. So don't slack too much on trying to rebuild your wall and keeping a couple of units back at home. You see the mines are still doing their job here. If there was a tank, they would just have no chance whatsoever. So repair is still good here from MMA. There's a lot of stuff being fried up in the main base in the meantime because Starbuck is trying to get more drones out. Now all of a sudden it's 43 drones to, or rather 43 SCVs to 23 drones. There is no way Starbuck is going to win a longer game at this rate because he is more than double behind in the SCV or the worker count, and he's on 2 hatchery against 3 command centers. So this is held. This game is over as long as MMA doesn't really mess up from this point. So the last one we're going to take a look at is a little different. It's a cheese that's kind of meant to counter the Reaper opener. So this is something you also need to really be mindful of. A lot of people will say, you know, the Reapers are good and everything, but the disadvantage is that they can't be in 2 places at once, and they're just not that strong if they're forced to fight. So this is what Life's approach is going to be in this game. So Life is going to open up with a pool and a gas before hatchery, and that should be a really big red flag here, but it's not going to be for anything like Banelings. It's just going to be for speed and continued Zerglings to try and harass him to death. So there's the pool and the hatchery before the pool and the gas before hatchery. So once Maru's Marauder gets down there, he's going to know about this. This is also another advantage if you can ever find the time to SCV scout. It's not terribly common in this matchup, but if you wind up hitting this build a lot, it might be worth it. Because if your SCV comes down here and sees no hatchery by this timing, then you know what, I should probably keep my Reaper back at home, just for the extra safety. And maybe I should build my command center on the high ground rather than the low ground in that circumstance. So those are the ideas here from life, but it could save you quite a bit of money if you were willing to SCV scout. So the Reaper's out, and the Reaper sees these Zerglings coming across the map. Fortunately enough for him, a lot of times the Zergs will try to circumvent the Reaper so that they don't know until the Zerglings are back in their base. So the Reaper hitting the watchtower, kind of scouting around a little bit before it gets there, is able to catch this, and maybe Morrow has an inkling that this is going on. Zerglings being out this fast and at this part of the map is unusual, because normally when you run a Reaper opener, the Zerglings won't actually start to pop out until you're already at their base. So this should be a big red flag for Morrow. So we can see Zergling speed is almost done. Morrow sees a lot more Zerglings are on the field, as his Reaper did just jump up there and see that. So Zerglings start running out here. Meanwhile, back at home, Morrow knows what's going on, so he starts a bunker down by his command center, because the biggest thing they want to do with their Zerglings is cancel this command center. So he starts a bunker down here. He's continuing to produce units. I honestly would rather see him just continue to produce Marines off of this rather than wait for the reactor. But, I mean, that's a kind of a decision-making thing that you need to make for yourselves. You could even make a second barracks if you're really worried about this, but this at least allows you continued Marine production off of this rather than having to wait for the reactor, because it takes forever to build. So that's just the one thing I disagree with, but either way, if you control properly, it'll be fine. You can see he does have the money for the extra barracks anyway, but still, he's just going to start a command center in his main, which, as we've seen before, command centers are ironically okay against cheese, because if you lose a lot of workers, you can still make a comeback because you have that reproduction potential. So the Zerglings are here. They have Zergling speed now, and the Reapers are going to get caught by that. So they need to try and micro their way out of this. He's trying to separate a couple of Zerglings off at a time and deal with those the best he can. He can jump up the ramps and stuff like that. And if this bunker finishes, he'll be in a lot better shape. But the fact that he chose to produce this reactor rather than more Marines means that he just doesn't have enough to stop the rest of these Zerglings that are coming in here. So that's the one reason I kind of disagree with that. And he should also be willing to pull a few more SCVs to repair this bunker as well. So a couple of decisions I would have made a little differently, but of course we have the perfect knowledge and perfect ability to sit here and pause the game and make these decisions, whereas he really doesn't. So this command center is unfortunately going to get cancelled, and if he was a little more aggressive about it, he could probably finish it and lift it off, but either way, there's no way it's going to get done at this rate. Zerglings are going to poke this down, he's going to have to cancel it. So you might say, how is this a video on holding off cheese? It looks like Morrow's way behind. But if he is making this many Zerglings, like we have always talked about, he's not going to have that many drones back at home. Only 17 drones versus 20 SCVs for Morrow. So Morrow's still ahead economically. And if he can stop the bleeding and eventually make a comeback, or rather not make a comeback, but just play out a more normal game, command center on the high ground, let's just imagine that he never started this command center. He can cancel it and get his money back. Let's just imagine it's 20 SCVs to 17 workers, to 17 drones. He started a command center on the high ground, and life went hatchery first. That's basically the same circumstance, because once the Hellions are out, these Zerglings aren't going to matter too much. So you can just imagine that it's kind of a reset game, and you can just play out from that point. So even though you don't just crush the cheese, that doesn't mean that you're behind. So still trying to do his best to deal with these Zerglings, but they're still going to cancel this command center, so that's unfortunate. But pulling SCVs a little bit, need to be willing to tank for those a little bit, and as long as the Hellions are out, you should be fine against the Zerglings as long as you control properly. Now it's 20 SCVs to 20 drones, and from this point on, we kind of just play into a more normal game. As Morrow gets his Hellions out on the map, life doesn't really have a lot to answer to that. Morrow can move his command center down, he can start a third command center, which he's doing right now, and all of a sudden this looks like a fairly normal game from this point. So I just want to demonstrate that even though you didn't outright stop the cheese, that doesn't mean that you're dead or that you're in a bad spot. This is a fairly normal game from this point, and just defending against it and putting them into an uncomfortable position is going to benefit you more often than not. So hope you guys enjoyed that video. I'll always be back for more, and if you have any questions or anything, just post them down in the comments, and I usually respond to as many as I can. So yeah, take care, and I'll see you guys later.